I know a place where dealers roam and they very scary. Try and bust your brain like when I pop the cherry.
The court-ordered execution of Shannon Johnson has been carried out. Johnson was executed by lethal injection and was pronounced dead at 2:55 a.m. on Friday, April 20th, 2012.
When the warden offered him a chance to offer his final words, he mumbled something that nobody could understand, a couple sentences, people heard a word or two here and there, but nothing anyone could understand.
Warden Phelps did a consciousness check at 2:49 and said in a loud voice, "Inmate Johnson, can you hear me?" And he said that twice. Again, there was no movement after that, and Johnson was pronounced dead at 2:55.
Now it's time for us to focus on getting our lives back together and have some closure in our lives, because this has been a long road since our son Cameron Hamlin was brutally murdered by Shannon Johnson. It's been a long road.
As far as being for and against execution, because this has been a really huge topic, you would never know until you have experienced it.
I'm glad that tonight took place, and maybe that my brother can rest now. It took going on 6 long years, and I'm just glad everything took place tonight. And I know my brother's looking down, and he's probably smiling right now.
Some cases unfold with resistance. Motions are filed, timelines stretch. Doubt creeps in through procedural cracks. Others move forward with a kind of grim certainty, each moment stacking neatly on the one before it, as though the outcome has already been written. The case of Shannon Johnson belongs to the latter, not because the system rushed, but because nothing meaningfully slowed it down. Long before his name appeared in connection with a homicide, Shannon Johnson had been moving steadily through the criminal justice system. His first contacts came as a juvenile, where court intervention began early and often. Those encounters did not fade with age. They hardened. By adulthood, arrests had turned into convictions, convictions into supervision, supervision into violations. Each opportunity for correction ended the same way. Back before a judge, back in custody, back under scrutiny. By his early 20s, Johnson's criminal record reflected escalation rather than interruption. Weapons offenses, drug charges, repeated probation violations. In 2003, he was convicted of rape in the 4th degree, stemming from an assault on a young woman he had known since childhood. That conviction would later carry legal weight far beyond the sentence imposed at the time. It would become a defining feature of how the court ultimately judged his capacity for violence and the risk he posed to others. Nothing in the record suggests his behavior stabilized afterward. Violations continued, new charges followed, supervision failed, rehabilitation efforts were offered and exhausted. By the fall of 2006, Johnson was nearly 23 years old, and his trajectory was no longer ambiguous. On September 24, 2006, Cameron Hamlin spent the night at the home of Lakesha Truit in Wilmington, Delaware. In the morning, the two got into a car together. The plan was ordinary. Hamlin was driving Truit to her grandmother's house to pick up her son, who had stayed there overnight. After that, he intended to take his own mother to church. They never made it that far. As the vehicle approached the stop sign, Shannon Johnson pulled up alongside them. He was driving his own car. Words were exchanged. The record does not describe a prolonged confrontation or a chase. It documents a brief encounter that escalated quickly. Johnson produced a handgun and fired into Hamlin's vehicle. The shots struck Cameron Hamlin. He died from his injuries. Truit ran from the scene to her grandmother's home. From there, She called police and reported what had happened. She identified Johnson as the shooter. Due to concerns for her safety, she was advised not to return to her home until Johnson was apprehended. He was not immediately caught. On November 10th, 2006, Truit made the decision to return briefly to her home to retrieve clothing for her son. While there, she encountered a woman named Rima Stewart and had a short conversation. As she was leaving, Shannon Johnson ran toward her car. He was armed. Johnson fired multiple shots. Truit was struck. She survived, but a portion of one bullet remains lodged in her chest to this day. 5 days later, Johnson was arrested. From that point forward, he remained incarcerated. The charges that followed were extensive. Johnson was indicted for first-degree murder in the death of Cameron Hamlin. He was also charged with first-degree assault, reckless endangering, multiple counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and possession of a deadly weapon by a prohibited person. At trial, the focus was narrow. The facts of Hamlin's death were not disputed. The jury heard testimony from Lakesha Truit and other witnesses. They heard about the shooting at the stop sign. They heard about the later attack that left Truit wounded. They were asked to decide responsibility, not speculation. They were also presented with Johnson's criminal history. In a capital case, that history is not incidental. It is part of the legal calculus. To establish a statutory aggravating circumstance, the state introduced evidence of Johnson's prior conviction for rape in the 4th degree. The victim of that offense, Quanta Thomas, testified. She described entering Johnson's car during a conversation, asking to be let out, and being driven against her will to a secluded area near Wilmington Hospital. She described being pregnant at the time. She described resisting. She described the assault. The jury unanimously found that the state had proven the existence of a statutory aggravating factor, a prior conviction involving the use or threat of force or violence against another person. The court then examined the broader record, weapons convictions dating back to 2002, probation violations stacked on top of one another, drug distribution charges, repeated failures under supervision, juvenile adjudications for assault, offensive touching, and drug offenses, institutional misconduct, assaultive behavior toward guards and inmates, testimony that Johnson had attempted from inside prison to solicit the killing of Lakesha Truit, the sole eyewitness to the murder charge. The court did not describe these as isolated events. It described a lifestyle, one driven by control, possessiveness, and disregard for others. During sentencing, victim impact testimony was presented. Cameron Hamlin's father described raising a son who worked, saved money, and dreamed of a future in music. He described renovating his home to build a sound studio for him. He described the silence that followed his death. His brother spoke about the absence left behind. The defense presented mitigation, Johnson's age, his unstable upbringing, his early exposure to life on the streets, his lack of family support, his psychological assessments. The court acknowledged those factors. It weighed them. In September 2008, the court concluded that the aggravating factors outweighed the mitigating ones. Shannon Johnson was sentenced to death by lethal injection. He also received decades of additional prison time for the non-capital convictions. For most people, that sentence would mark the beginning of a long legal fight. For Johnson, it marked the end. He waived his appeals. He dismissed his attorneys. He declined further review. Courts ordered competency evaluations. Each time, he was found capable of understanding his choice. Each time, he reaffirmed it. Outside lawyers attempted to intervene. Courts declined. The process continued. In April 2012, Shannon Johnson was executed by lethal injection at the James T. Vaughn Correctional Center. He was 28 years old. He became the last person executed by the state of Delaware. Later, the law changed. The death penalty was abolished. The machinery that carried out his sentence was dismantled. What did not change was the record. A young man was killed at a stop sign while trying to do something ordinary. A woman survived an attempt on her life and carries physical evidence of it to this day. A defendant moved through the justice system without resistance at the end, not because he was denied options, but because he refused them. The system did what it was designed to do, and the consequences remain.